take through a lot of the presentation today. Arthur's here as well to help out, particularly with some of the commercial stuff, and we've got some of the progress updates on that, and we'll share what we can. My role, as it says on the slide, I'm the rail design lead. It's usually easier to answer what that involves by saying what it doesn't involve. Right. So I'm effectively responsible for not the earthworks, not the buildings, and not the commercial process. If it sits on top of the ground, if it involves the railway in some way, it's probably coming into my remit. To a great extent, that includes all of the traditional railway disciplines, some of the less traditional ones, some of the security, some of the digital work, stuff like that as well. So providing the whole rail system that is going to exist at GCRE and how we use that. So I'll move on to the first slide. So I'm going to assume that a lot of people have seen stuff about GCRE before, but maybe not everyone. And
is it worth, David, just asking colleagues in the room, are you all to some extent familiar with the project, or is there anybody has no idea? Everybody has a grasp. Okay, great.
So this will be a summary of what we've told you before about what we are and where we are. We'll not linger on any of that, just to make sure everyone is up to the same pace. So we are still in the same location we were going to be in before. We are still at the head of the Dealey's Valley, northeast of Swansea. And we are still working on converting the former mine, undercast mining site there. It has changed a little bit over the past 24 months since I first saw it on site. Work has been going on, particularly under sort of the regeneration of the site and the restoration of the site for the mining operations. But some of that has been progressing towards what we ultimately need for the rail system.
We've lost the slides on fine.
All right.
Yeah, I don't know what's happened.
After trying to get them back again.
Okay, well, you're trying to do that. I'll keep going. Hopefully, you can see the slides. Yeah. So, to put that back into context, south end of the Brecon Beacons National Park. I would offer to try and pronounce that in the new words we should be using, but I can't. So northeast of Swansea, at the end of the branch line, they used to continue on through to Brecon and north of there. But we're still at the end of that branch line connection, which is still very significant for some of our plans, and particularly the plans in the short to medium term, both some of the long-term plans. So the next slide, sorry,
It's working.
I forget I'm clicking mine in front of me. So we've been working on making sure that what we're offering on the site is absolutely what's needed for the market. That's really critical because we've got to get funding on the basis of a business case that says this site is going to work. So some of what's on here is what we've told you about before. Some of what we told you about before isn't there anymore. One key element was going to be some long-term rolling stock storage, which we've just found the business case is not substantially enough to let us develop that out at the first stage. So we've changed our priorities a little bit there, and we're working much more towards the core priorities of a purpose-built site for being able to test, demonstrate, and certify all sorts of technologies associated with the railway industry in a safe offline live environment. Those core services include rolling stock testing, infrastructure innovations, and the showcasing of products, and plus the maintenance and limited storage associated with the testing. Future plans include a technology park to build out around the site so we can attract investment from businesses that have used the site to develop the product, show off their products. They can actually have their factories, their offices on the doorstep as well, much the same way as the motor industry is built up in Northamptonshire, where it really is a one-stop shop for everything. One of the key elements is continuing to develop this as an open access facility. So it's not designed to be owned by somebody with significant skin in the game who then closes everyone else. It's for everyone to be able to use. And in particular, we're looking all the way from big companies. We talk about global manufacturing, but also railway undertakings from around the world, all the way down to the smallest SMEs. Who really do struggle to be able to do some of this work in a live railway environment because of the constraints that come on that. So we've been building up tiered membership. So different organisations can all get involved in different ways and be part of that. We're still planning for a 24-hour facility, 7 days a week, and providing the right sort of accommodation in terms of hotel space and business accommodation. And finally, we will talk about sustainability a bit. We are still working towards that target of being the UK's first operational net zero railway. We have to say operational because the construction is another matter altogether, and that is a bit more of a challenge. So you've seen this picture before, except you haven't, because it is a little bit different. Those who remember will see there's something missing. There used to be a second kidney shape around here. I will explain where that's gone as we get to the relevant part of the presentation. But we have rationalised the railway footing in. It doesn't mean we're offering anything less in terms of the facilities. We're just doing it in a different way. But that's the overview of the site. So we have the 2 testing loops and what we call the washrooms area, which is where all of the storage, maintenance, office space, all of that kind of stuff goes on down in that area there. To the north of us is the Brecon Beacon, so this is looking broadly northwards.
Yeah, you don't want any neighbours too close to be going on trains 24 hours.
Well, they're pretty close. But we do have that planning permission as part of the whole regeneration of the whole area. As far as the Welsh Government, this is a regeneration project, not a railway project. And so that was really instrumental in getting some generous operating.
But just you mentioned noise and neighbours, and clearly we want to be really good neighbours. But you know, there are a couple of things that we say to the local community. We've held several, and we'll continue to do so, local community engagement discussions. But the issue or the question of noise, if there was any development kind of near to where any of us live, we'd legitimately have, you know, a concern about how that might affect us. So we're able to say 2 things really to the local community, and as David was saying, some of them do live quite close to us. The first is that, you know, we'll be under strict planning, control, guidance, managed by the local authority, and noise levels will be very much part of that, and they'll be closely monitored. So that's the kind of one side of the equation. But of course, the other side is, as David was explaining, we're positioning ourselves as an international innovation centre, and you will know that noise abatement and noise reduction technology and innovation, and all sorts of different types of barriers, materials, shapes and sizes.
It's a very hot topic.
You know, it's a big industry in its own right, and there are several of those companies actually that have been talking to us and are keen to showcase some of their technologies on this site. So you know, we think we can approach that in both. Actually, another methodology will be some bunding and some natural kind of noise mitigation, growing trees and so on. But you know, there will be that kind of statutory approach managed by the local authority, but it's one of the many areas we'll seek to demonstrate innovation in practice as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Right from day one, because we can build some of that into the construction, and we'll come on to how we're doing that as well. Short while. So the next slide, I won't spend long on this. It will be in the pack, which will be available. But there's a list here of what rolling stock testing is all about for us and the core services. It's the sort of thing that's offered at a number of locations around the world, and there are several facilities in Europe. There is generally a 3-year waiting list to get into most of these facilities. So while we're doing something that exists elsewhere, we are not doing something that has also a market for it to be done here as well. And a lot of the facilities out there, they have their limitations in different ways. All the facilities have limitations. Some of them are physical, some of them are commercial, some of them are geographical. And so there's still a lot of interest in other countries as well as UK rolling stock coming here for testing purposes. So it allows us to provide a continuous testing loop of 7 kilometres, about 180 kilometres an hour. The 2 curves that you saw at the ends of the previous diagram really constrain what we can do. We're taking those to the limit that we realistically can to get the best speed we can out of that loop, but that's what holds us to that speed. So that allows us to provide a good railway, not a perfect railway, but a good railway to test railway vehicles on. We don't want it to be perfect because every time we test something, say, yeah, well, that works fine on a perfect piece of railway, you know, put it out in the real world, and then we find the problems. So we actually want to be able to test in a more realistic environment that is representative of the real world, not representative of the ideal. All the integrated access to facilities, all the services around the site that you'd expect to find, possibly through partner organisations rather than GCRE itself in terms of sort of testing, commissioning, and certification and things like that. We've got the access to the South Wales main line via the branch, and that will allow us to bring an awful lot of stuff in by rail as far as possible. We do also have reasonable road access that we can bring, especially extra size vehicles we're gauging for continental rolling stock as well as UK rolling stock, which we can't necessarily bring in due to a few things that they knock over on the way. But we do have good road access as well, especially once the head of the Valleys roads upgrades are complete. So it also gives us that opportunity for local testing in the UK, closer to manufacturing and assembly sites rather than UK manufacturing centres having to send in across Europe to do that. A few comments there about the digital twin. We'll talk about digital a little bit later. And at the moment, you know, we don't have a waiting list. If you want to get in anywhere else, you've got to be booking now for 3 years' time.
Yeah.
Okay, we might not be open for another 2 to 3 years, but in 12 months' time, we'll still have those slots available. In terms of infrastructure innovation, this is the bit that's really different, at least within Europe. So Andy Doherty would have been standing here telling you how back in 2000, when we had gauge corner tracking, all the research that we then did about that and testing of rails to try and understand what was going on had to go out to North America.
Yeah.
There was not a facility like this where that kind of testing could be undertaken either in this country or across Europe. It's now another 7-kilometre testing loop. I'll explain how we've done it, but we've got the 2 loops going around on the same 7-kilometre loop rather than a 7 and a 4.5, which is what we originally had. This is going to allow us to use all types of infrastructure. So when I say infrastructure, it's everything from bolts to bridges. It includes the systems that attach to it. It includes the downstream digital systems that you want to plug in. Literally anything that could be used in a railway environment, we should have the chance to be able to actually use that on our site and test that. So we've got to create a highly adaptable site infrastructure. We've got to make it work around sort of plug and play principles. That we can't have someone's technology in there that if someone else wants to come and test something that does the same thing, they can't plug it in because it's different. You know, we've got to try and maintain that open access and not provide things ourselves that then prohibit other people coming in. That's quite a challenge. Again, across every type of asset, we know full well how well we can just put 2 things in on the railway and everything works miraculously. So that's a good integration challenge for us. Again, we've got the full range of operational times, and we've got the chance with this loop to do accelerated long-term endurance testing. And you know, this is where things like seeing how the track copes under heavy tonnages and different technologies on the track. We've got a unique opportunity to really put that into place and test it to its extremes. And just to support that, you know, there's a lot of safety and design in terms of the operational principles as well as what we're doing. So we're looking at how we can control that train in an automatic way so that we don't have to put people onto the railway at all, and therefore we can stretch the parameters further than we ever would if we've got people involved in the loop. Moving on, from a commercial point of view, this is an area that we've been working on a lot in the last year, about how we can actually showcase technologies and provide a front door to the best-in-class facilities, from certification bodies to the innovators, the big clients, and as I talked before about people having their sales room effectively on the doorstep of their premises. We're already doing some of that. So we've had a couple of competitions, one in particular through Innovate UK at the moment, which is funded to about £8 million, has 24 projects that are all coming to demonstrate new technologies that can be incorporated into the build of GCRE, not just something that they want to test when it's finished, but that we can actually test as we're building. And that helps us get some of the facilities we need. So one example is acoustic fencing. That's in the competition. We've got some novel train detection we've got a mobile rail panel handler that's going to be demonstrated through that, and some composite materials, include and alternative concrete or things used in sleepers and retaining structures. So we've got quite a lot of different things going on there even today. And the past year, we've seen those competitions go through a first stage and narrow down to this.
It was just an open sort of invite to the world to take.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Like be involved in this. Yeah.
Well, there were two. So there's one for showcasing where people could offer to bring something in and we could incorporate into the site, and we got a lot of interest in that for people who wanted to contribute and could see the value of having their project in place. But the Innovate UK competition was a funded competition for new innovations. So first of all, come and do a feasibility study. We had 24 feasibility studies. They got down selected to 16 projects, which are now going to actually build something in the next 12 months. And that will be going in as far as possible into the final construction. There's some elements that can't, because we just won't be ready in time, but they'll be demonstrated still. So the principles of the railway system we've got, so again, when I talk about railway system, this is really everything from the drainage upwards out into the electrical systems, the signalling systems, the telecom systems, the track itself, information, the digital systems that connect to it, the telecoms. I'm sure I did not mention something, but it's in there. But our fundamental logic is we are a completely separated railway. Yes, we have a physical connection back to Network Rail, but we're isolated that with controls and with signal principles. So apart from the rails that join through, we are two completely independent systems. The only other equivalent to that is we will hang off the GSMR network so that we can control, but we will still operate in isolation within that. So it's physically separate and controlled separately. We're taking the human out and separating the human from the design as much as we can. So we're looking at how we can automate as many of those operations as we can, how we can remove individuals from that environment. We can operate each of those two loops independently, so we can run train testing on one and we can run infrastructure testing on the other at the same time, doing different things. And some of our digital approach is how do we make sure that we manage what's going on so that if something's happening on the test train that you didn't expect, we know about it, so you don't go looking for ghosts in the machine with tests you're doing elsewhere. So there's a lot of integration to do in order to separate that in terms of the knowledge we've got about the site. I mean, that's pretty much it for the purpose of this. To look at it in pictures, so as I said, we've gone from having two physically separate loops to actually running them both around a 7-kilometre trace. So the inner loop is our infrastructure loop primarily. The outer loop is for train testing. So the outer loop is designed to be a constant design, but the trains change and so you keep a constant their expenses there. The inside is the opposite of that, where we plan to run specific trains with known characteristics, but we can change all sorts of aspects of that. But the two loops also give us another advantage, which is that we can do system integration, because we can provide two different systems altogether across the railway view. So we can have different types of overhead line system, we can have different types of signalling, and we can connect different power systems and different things around that. So that we can actually realistically create interfaces that exist out there in the real world. Yes, we have to compromise on some of it because they are close together, but there are ways to achieve that. And we can utilise that because at this point here, there are connections across from one loop to the other. So we can run around in a folded in figure of 8. Yeah. So you can run on one loop, onto the other, back out onto the other one again. That means we can run from a traditional, what signalling terms we talk about a class B system with the traditional signalling that's out there. And the outer loop, it'll be all radio based. So it allows you to run those two systems. We'll also have all the kind of civil structure specs. So there'll be bridges, there'll be underpasses, there'll be places to test level crossing, but we do not have any level crossings in an operational sense, but we'll be able to test all of those kind of integrated facilities and pretty much anything else we think of at the same time. The test facilities do extend down into the sidings. We have a sort of start and end of the mission launch area, so we can do We can do turbulence environments, we can do slow speed testing, we can have a sharp curve coming out of that to allow us to do the testing on a 1 in 150 metre radius, which is part of the testing standard.
The incline, David?
The incline, I'm sorry, I've just lost my slides.
Adding.
Still.
I do not know you.
I'm going to lose that as well if I'm not getting. Okay.
Sorry, yeah. So the gradient, our site's on 2 levels. You may have noticed from the kind of aerial view that does seem to be it's quite a hill. It's very substantial, and to get from one level to the other, we have a gradient going up here of 1 in 37,
Right.
which is going to give us a nice challenging environment again to test trains on as much as to get up, but it is going to be a challenge. And as it comes around the top, it's on a curve as well, which does make it exciting. But unfortunately, yeah, the physical geometry of the site meant that we had to do that. We've minimised it as much as possible. This line's being raised up as far as we can to achieve that, but we're going to have some very tough bits of railway there to test them on, and just to understand how it's working through life. That also gives us the opportunity to use sensor technology and know that we're actually seeing things that are likely to be moving and taking a lot of forces. So we should get some really interesting data just through our own systems. It's sometimes a misapprehension that GCRE is here to run all the tests and pay for all the tests. We're not. We're here to provide the environment which people can come and do the tests.
Providing a laboratory.
Yes, exactly. We're providing the playground for these experiments to take place in. But we can have these wonderful opportunities where some of that playground is very challenging. And we will gather data about that as well, which is one of the assets that we will build up. So in terms of how we're stressing that, particularly the infrastructure loop, as I said before, it's about accelerating endurance testing. How do we achieve that? So the key principles are a large, heavy train. We want to test beyond the normal, and we want to test it frequently. So we want to build up that mileage, that ton of mileage, very, very quickly. So we're planning for a freight train, which is loaded to 1,000 tons with 30 ton axle loads, and the track has all been designed to 30-ton loadings, but we will then see the results of that. And we've also got some passenger stock, which we've already got installed ready for the site, which we'd also run in an overloaded situation. That stock gives us the ability to add more things onto it as well, and so understand things from the train's perspective, where we can plug different things into that train, cut holes in it, do whatever we like, to allow people to carry out those experiments and understand what's happening to the trains as well. So running those trains 16 hours a day, 5 days a week, in blocks of 10 weeks, and that gives us a little bit of maintenance time in between each. The 10 weeks actually includes 8 weeks of activity on the testing, and then there's a week at each end for installing and decommissioning things that go in. So that's the site that's in there, and people could arrange to have a section of the track with something fitted into it. They can hire the whole loop, and there are different ways to cut that depending on what the experiments are. As I said, automatic train operation, so we can just keep it running. We could do things where you would be a bit uncomfortable about the driver being there. It gives us more opportunity.
Yeah, certainly in Pueblo, they do run things to destruction.
Yes, that's it. Yeah,
We don't really want to run the train if you're going to do that.
when we find the crack, we don't want to say, "Oh, we better stop trains again." We want to say, "What happens when we leave them?"
Yeah.
It might be we leave it another week. And ideally, we want to know just before something catastrophic happens. But our risk profile, it's all about managing risk, and it's managing risk in a different way, because if we take people out of the equation, then we can increase the likelihood of a risk because we've reduced the impact of that risk, and way to still have an acceptable overall risk principle that it does what we want, and ultimately feeds back into the knowledge of the rest of the railway.
Is it worth mentioning HS1 as a kind of
Coming up.
coming up? Okay.
Yeah. And what we're trying to do here actually isn't new in industry. Aerospace and automotive do a lot of this already. We're just providing the facilities where the railway can really, really think about that and do that. Two more slides. A little bit more detail on the infrastructure test loop. We've got an area on the north side. This is on the top embankment area. We're introducing what we call the bung, which is actually literally just a physical barrier between the two tracks to give us a little bit more risk management. So if there is a derailment, then there will be, but it gives us something to protect it. It also means that if we're running test train operations on the outer track, we've also got a physical separation when people are installing new items. So that gives us a little bit more operational flexibility in a safe way. And we'll also have a second passing loop at that point, which gives us even more opportunities. We can actually build some design defect into one of the loops so that we can test trains running over broken rails or providing a rough ride, but we've still got the normal way past as well if we don't want to be exposing a particular train to that. So that gives us a lot of flexibility in what we can put in there. That's about all I can say on that one. So one of the concepts of the infrastructure loop is that it's not all one piece of railway that looks the same all the way around, but actually we can split it down for different clients. And these are just examples; they're not booked into using it yet. But the principle that we can have all these different types of railway, but something that's representative of it, you could replace one of those with slab track. So well, okay, we could look at slab track. Given the geology of our site, you could look at slab track on hard foundations, and you could look at slab track on really soft ones, and you could look at across the interface of the two. So there are different sections that could be used to carry out different elements of that testing. And again, for all those different ones. And that will allow us to see in a much more accelerated rate, especially on some of the lower category, which doesn't see the levels of traffic. We'll be able to build up a lot more information about how that evolves over time. So use case HS1. So this is an example. Again, this is not something that's already booked in and ready to go, but this is how it could work. And HS1 are an interested stakeholder in the process. So we take a meaningful length of the loop, which you see here, 216 meters might be enough for that. So we can take sleepers and rail and ballast that has been recently renewed on HS1, bring that out, and then install it. Maybe other things as well, but we'll focus on the rail. When we then put that in and start running our heavy load around it, we then start to see that accelerated life beyond the point that HS1 were willing to keep it in place. So they can understand how it's going to degrade in the future, what the failure mechanisms are, and what the leading indicators they might have of failure are going to be. That can then be used by them as a client to build back into their maintenance plans. Well, they might be able to get another 5 years or another 10 years out of the assets they've got, but they've always been working off the customer practice that we've got because there's no way to prove otherwise without doing the testing.
And actually, whichever way that experiment goes, whether there's more life than anticipated or less, as you can imagine, that's an equation with hundreds of millions of pounds. So it's a really high stakes equation.
And also because if they're there as a client, they've got their representative systems in, they can work on things with the representative equipment and test whether it's maintenance regimes, operational techniques, anything else like that, without interfering with the real operation of the railway. They can create a microcosm of that in real. I know HS1 have done a lot of stuff with digital twins and some modelling around that. This gives a way of actually demonstrating that in the real world as well and tying back those solutions.
Yeah, I mean, it's an excellent way of trying to validate models, isn't it? So, because if you can build a digital model of what your rail is, and that it's going to be quite interesting to validate that in the real world, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. A model's only as accurate as the information you built it from. If you can get better information, you'll build a better model. And so, the last one bullet point really, that needs to be a long-term process. This is not come in for 2 weeks and we know everything we want, but building up relationships with the likes of HS1, with HS2, with Network Rail, with Wales, the list goes on. We can create those relationships and actually build a lot of evidence, or support the building of a lot of evidence across the industry. I talked a little bit about the integration. I'm not going to say anything more about that now. This diagram really just picks out the key highlights, but that's the
So
story.
this is really for the benefit of the train operators as well.
Well, it's the train operators, but also it's from the signalling perspective and how we interface those systems, signalling in particular. Crossrail, where was the biggest problem with interfacing everything? It was between the electronic systems.
Well, we've spoken discreetly, of course, to some of the major organisations involved in Crossrail, and they've said to us, I mean, they wouldn't necessarily publish this, but they've said to us, if they'd had the opportunity through the kind of design and prep phase of Crossrail to work at GCRE, a whole raft of the problems they encountered would have been significantly mitigated in advance.
Trying it, see if it works.
And equally for HS2, regardless of how far they do go or they don't go, at some point they have to integrate back into the classic network. And again, we've got the opportunity to build something that is representative of that interface. And with some of the clever things we can do now with virtualized signaling technology and stuff, we can create literally the interface they're going to have years before they can start running trains across it. To see that they can test their trains against that interface completely away from their own site. So that's the kind of opportunity that is there through that integration process. So moving on really to operating philosophy, and again, one of the key things that we've been doing since the last presentation is trying to understand how we need to operate, what we need to do, and what the value is to the industry in that. So the basics of that, well, we are a giant laboratory. That's what we're providing. We're not providing a railway that moves people around. We're providing a test bed. It's not just railway systems. There's a few more examples of that later. Railway systems is the catalyst for this, but there are plenty more things that we can do around that, and there are things that can be proven in a railway environment that can have a whole load of other uses as well. Again, particularly around the digital world and things we can do there. But fundamentally, we need to be able to develop and test non-approved products and systems. So that's a really important part of our site. We're not adding any value if you have to have a trial certificate before you come to our site. What you need to be able to do is come to our site, try something out before you've even told Network Rail you're thinking about doing it potentially. Especially for the smaller innovators, you don't want to have to jump through all the hoops to prove that this bolt fits into this train there if your fundamental technology doesn't work. So we need to provide a platform where something can be tested in a more flexible way. That means we have to take a risk managed and risk tolerant approach, but it's different. So we can assess things on a case-by-case basis and understand the risk to us and our risk profile as opposed to what would be useful around. When you get through that hurdle, then you can start going down the line of, okay, well, let's make sure that all the bits join up now. The example I usually give is you want to fix something to a train to monitor something. And to get that out on the main line, you've got to do a lot of work to get the mounting onto the train right so that it's safe and it's great. So you get out there and you discover that it needs twice the size battery that it had before. And then all that work you've done for the mounting has been a waste of time. We can provide the train where you can put that in a much more simple way, prove the technology inside, and then move forward to the next thing without that abortive cost, which, unfortunately you do see a lot. The methodology behind that on the next slide. So we're trying to exclude the human as far as possible from that in design. We've got the challenge that as a site, we have to provide public access across the site. There are certain public rights of way which have to be restored. So we've got to make sure that we exclude the public from the areas that they mustn't be in, while maintaining that access. We've got to be able to monitor the test areas we've got. So we've got to control access in and out of test areas and provide security and surveillance around that. we've got to provide that physical separation we talked about. So the concept of the bund gives us a way to actually physically separate things and mitigate any incidents. Automatic operation of the loop for testing again. And we have to pass this down to our clients as well. This is not just about us setting all the rules, because as novel things come in, we have to take each one on a case by case basis. So we need clients to work with us to make sure that their test philosophy fits in with ours and can be managed on the site, and that they've got the right people to work with that. And in operation, we need our own robust structures. We're a small operation compared to the railway, but we still need similar roles, and we need to have that really strong engineering lead, because while the outcomes of many of our risks might be commercial as well as engineering, the management of those risks is almost exclusively engineering. And we need to do that in the right way. So we need to do rigorous understanding of what's going on all the time. We need to be monitoring our assets, monitoring the activities on our assets, providing expert advice. So we proposed a sort of scientific advisory group so that we can continue to engage with the people using the site. And underpinning a lot of that is the digital twin aspect. There's lots to talk about digital twins, and if you put 5 experts in the room, you get 6 definitions of what they are.
Absolutely.
That's because they are so many different things. And actually, what we're providing is a digital ecosystem that allows discrete digital twins. It allows our operational twin. It allows modeling and simulation. It allows data pooling and sharing. And for us as an asset owner, some of that is valuable data that people pay for as well. So we've got the asset management of data in there. But that also gives us a huge other opportunity, which is, well, we can allow people to come in and demonstrate new technologies in managing old technologies. And so that will also become part of the test platform as well. How am I doing for time? Sorry. Yeah, okay. So as I said before, it's open to all. So, from the smallest organisations up to tier 1, as for beyond tier 1 to the railway operators as well. There is no restriction on whether that's a train operating company, a rolling stock owner, or the infrastructure owner. I talked a little bit about Innovate UK. So we're doing this very actively at the moment. The projects have just kicked off this month, the 16 delivery projects. They are all going through now. They've got 12 months work over a 15-month window to design into what we're building, what their solutions are. Find the way that they can demonstrate that activity, and then towards the back half of the year, actually implement them physically. So I keep trying to think of the things we've got. We've got a novel system for adjusting overhead wire heights so that we can test overhead wire gradients at different speeds. We've got composite materials in electrification structures and things like that. So a couple of projects around that. So we've got some monitoring and detection stuff. We've got work around drones and drone management beyond line of sight, which is currently the limit of the challenges. Beyond line of sight, you get into a very interesting area, but they will work with.
You're effectively a pilot.
Yes.
That, aren't you?
So some of that is not about the technology. The technology exists, and we've got a company involved who have sent their technology to a recent conflict in the East, and it has been used in that principle. It's not been used in this environment. It's not been used in the civil aviation context. So some of the innovation is around how you do it, not what you do it with. There's also Ukraine 2, which was announced sometime last year. Ukraine had a set of 3 principal innovation centres with different aspects of leading. Birmingham were leading on digital systems, Southampton were infrastructure, and Huddersfield were rolling stock. Ukraine 2 is establishing a new centre of excellence for testing and validation, and that is being built at our site. So it's going to be an integral core part of that.
And a £15 million capital grant from UKRI supports that.
Yeah, so that's bringing money in. So that money, well, the majority of that 15 million will be spent in building the facility on our site.
You'd be pleased to know that our SSP meetings were already talking about this and that.
Yeah. So, you know, that makes us become that real life demonstrator for all these new innovative technologies at all the different stages of TRI levels and rail infrastructure readiness levels, all the way through, but particularly accelerating that early innovation so that we can take forward the ideas that are going to work and allow people to fail faster and fail with less expense.
Yeah.
So our testing philosophy, we've got to allow rapid testing, and we've got to allow that of new and non-certified products and systems. So you won't need to come to us with a certificate saying this has been used somewhere before. What you will need to do is come and talk to us about the risk involved, understand how it impacts our site. We have to look at how it impacts other tests going on at the same time. So we may be fully happy to take a particular test, but not what that test's going on, because there's too much overlap. So we will manage those individual risks on a product by product basis. That allows us to take these non-certified products or products that simply aren't covered by the current standards, because we can disapply any of the standards. We use standards as a code of practice, Emyr standards, more than we use them as an absolute set of handcuffs, because if we don't need to do something different, then great, that's the best way to do it. But some of what we need to do allows us, it needs us to go beyond that just to achieve what we need to achieve. And so, you know, we'll look at any existing certification that does exist, but that may be from another country, that may be from another industry. And you know, that's really important when trying to get technology into the railway, and where we fall over, because if it's good enough for the military, surely it can't be completely unacceptable for the railway. So let's start from that point.
I'd like to think so.
And yeah, things will be risk assessed at different levels. So you know, looking at how often we need to monitor them, what we need to monitor, what we need to understand what's happening as the experiments go on. So building up that philosophy has been another big part of the past 6 to 12 months. Supporting that innovation is great, but ultimately products do need to get to the end of that. And what's not wanted, and this isn't just us, this is, you know, in talking with Emyr and the likes, what we don't want is just to get as far as we normally get, and then it still has to go through all the hurdles on the main line. We need to be able to accelerate the rest of that process as well. So when something has been demonstrated successfully in GCRE, there's a need to be able to take that through to the end of the certification process. Emyr are involved with us in terms of looking at how they can build that into product acceptance. We're talking to potential partners who might provide validation and certification services on site. So you can actually bring together the sort of paper-based validation and the on-site testing all into one environment. It doesn't mean that someone coming to us has to use the on-site partner. They can bring someone else in if they want, but it's one of those services available on site to be able to share out. So we're building up designs now to show where we can offices and sheds and things like that for testing discrete elements. But we won't build, but a partner may come in and then fund.
Yeah.
For example, an EMC testing environment. We can do the dynamic testing on the loops, and we'll establish that for that testing, but we can also provide specific facilities or the space for specific facilities so that it's all in one place again, as for the augmented industry.
Just to add to that, I mean, there's the paper side of it, if you like, the kind of stamp on the certificate, but we expect Network Rail and others to have a permanent presence at GCRE. So there's an opportunity for clients like Network Rail to directly familiarise themselves with what's going on, how a product is performing through a test validation certification cycle. So that you know, that whole process, which is very time consuming, expensive, bureaucratic moment,
I don't think
we can streamline that, we believe.
RSSB leads a lot of research in the industry collectively. And one of the problems we constantly have is, well, you can get it this far, it's designed, but so how do you take it that next step to say, well, how does it work, you know, in the real world, you know? So I think that when that's what the rolling stock company is very interesting, it's accumulating mileage and things like that.
Yes, definitely.
Just if everything does continue to work as it appears.
And we've had exactly that same discussion with RSSB, where they've had problems with some of their R&D projects because it becomes prohibitively expensive to do the actual trial. And then we will again give them the ability to do that because they can piggyback onto something that's already happening. So it's more of an incremental cost rather than having to pay for all the costs of a training, test, and everything else.
But it's, you know, there are nuances to this as well, which you'll all appreciate. So it's not just the kind of efficacy of the widget or the asset, but it's how easy or otherwise it is to install, how easy or otherwise it is to service and maintain.
Yeah.
And what is the real unit cost? So, you know,
Yeah. Does it work in typical Welsh weather? Yeah.
well, that too. So that's the kind of, that's the validation and certification piece. But we could be, somebody could be claiming in at a stage of development that's going to cost £1,000 per unit. Well, here there's an opportunity to install
Test
doesn't and prove that that asset could be installed at a price of £1,000 or per unit as described, not 5,000.
And that's, you know, been a common problem where there's been equipment that has been approved and been tested in an environment which it can be. And it's only when it's been installed as part of the job and trains are going past it on a daily basis, and the failures in the installation actually cause the problems, but they're only found because you only really get to install it that once. We give the environment where you can do a lot more of that installation work and test it in that environment, because we'll have a training unit every 3 or 4 minutes at a significant speed, putting a lot of pressure onto the environment.
Yeah.
So it's testing those things beyond the product itself as well, which is really useful. Okay. And these last 4 bullet points actually are quite important as well, because we're not just looking at how do we improve a product for the UK network. So we've really got the 4 cases. So one is a UK product that needs to be certified for the UK, and it's only going to be used in the UK. Or a product that's made in the UK, but actually it's going to be sold overseas and needs the appropriate certification for there. We want to be able to support that as well. Equally, we want to be able to support suppliers from outside of the UK. First of all, who want to bring products into the UK. There are plenty of international suppliers trying to bring their products in, so they need somewhere to do that. And finally, we still see that there is an element of space where an overseas supplier might use us, even though they're not going to sell into the UK, because we still provide the best facilities that they can get to test this in a realistic railway environment. So we're going to try and cater for all those 4. So it's not just how do we get them into the UK market, but how do we make GCRE the testing facility of choice for certifying all these products. I've mentioned digital a few times. This is a big journey for us, and you know it's one that's quite important to me as part of what I look after. But we've got a long way to go. We've got a vision, but we're starting very small. You know, we are currently in outline design in the rail systems world, a bit more into detailed design in the earthworks. We are using BIM2 level system and data approach, which we're trying to build up that. We've done some BIM modeling, and certainly at a marketing level and at a model sharing level for the design process. But we need to go a lot further than that, because we need to take that forward into real life and into operations. We need to provide the platform that when someone comes to test a piece of equipment, they can plug sensors in and they can interface with the rest of the environment around them, so they can see what their product's doing and what the products around them are doing at the same time. And we need to be able to do that for the sensing we put in to make sure that our site is doing what we expected it to do and is not moving out of alignment or anything else like that. But also so we can demonstrate to people doing their tests that we are providing them the compliant testing platform that they're expecting. And so that allows us to do the monitoring. We'll also be able to use that and use that common data source that we've got there, all that information, as part of our operation systems as well, and demonstrate some of those further steps going on. But with all of that, we have even more exciting opportunities, because there are models both in computers and in terms of physical simulators around universities and places like that. For example, Huddersfield have the pantograph rig they can test. We've got the opportunity to take our real world data and connect their systems, our systems, and the train out on the track, and actually see more of what's going on. And again, we're back to that whole feedback of the of a model, and how good is your model? Well, we can start to prove back with real world data.
Yeah, it's validate the model, yeah.
And there are many opportunities through that. I think we're nearly there. So training and development. This is an area that one of our colleagues, Rob Ford, who some will know from Network Rail until recently. This is one of the areas that he's focusing on. But as well as just having Uprint 2 on site and that connection with the universities, we're also developing our own training capabilities, and there's a lot of work going on with conversations going on, at least with the likes of Cardiff and Swansea and other local universities and those further away about how we can do things relating to training, relating to.
Yeah, there isn't a university with a lot of sort of rail specialism at the moment in South Wales, is there?
No, but there's a lot of, but there's also a lot of crossover capabilities. So one example is with Cardiff and University of South Wales. They've got an organisation, the Cyber Innovation Hub. Yeah. And actually, that's an area that the rail doesn't really understand very well. But the more and more digital we go, the more important that becomes. And for them, we are a very good real world environment that's really important in. So there's an opportunity for us to work with them to provide training in the cyber principles that people need as we move on into a different world. So it's not just about railway stuff, but there is also that opportunity that colleges and things can make use of facilities we've got where it would just be unaffordable to get into a rail program in the first place.
It's probably worth just making the point that Cardiff University and Swansea University are formal partners in the Ukraine 2 consortium bid, which was led by Birmingham. So Cardiff and Swansea will be very much at the heart of that endeavour. But as David was mentioning, there's, for example, a lot of hydrogen specialism at USW. Aberystwyth is hosting a national spectrum centre. So there are pockets of specialisms in other institutions as well, which will apply. Yeah. And of course, the colleges are really keen to work with us as well. Neath College and others. Neath College being the kind of on the doorstep.
And also the civil stuff and the earthwork stuff. There's expertise in some of those areas, and we're a really good example of returning mining land back to heavy use. There's a huge amount of learning around that as well. That's been. I think we've been flagged up as an example for East Europe.
Well, we hosted and we were kind of taken aback initially. The Bulgarian ambassador to the UK came to visit the site, and we were wondering what on earth, why he prioritised. He was coming to Wales, but he really wanted to come and see GCRE. And of course, the reason for that is that kind of Bulgaria, in many ways, is where Wales was kind of in the 1970s. Yeah. Still highly reliant on coal for something like 60% of its energy, but for kind of different ideological reasons. I mean, there was, Thatcher government at the end of the 70s, which had its views on what should happen to the mining industry then. But in Bulgaria today, it's the EU Green Deal agenda. So that kind of sustainability transition away from coal and fossil fuels. So they need to comply with that EU Green Deal. A lot of funding involved for Bulgaria as part of that. But of course, the flip side to that is they have hundreds of thousands of unionised miners whose livings depend on that industry and communities built around them for generations. So very much the issue that was faced here in the 70s and the 80s is very much a live issue over the next few years in countries like Bulgaria. So that's why he came to see us.
And then the last part, back to some of the social value of the GCRE doing, that also extends through the education and training piece and getting in early. There's two real drivers. One is just about getting the engineers interested in early of an age, and we're involved in in primary engineering with a number of schools so far. But also there's the other aspect of awareness and understanding what's going on at the site and tackling the risks of trespass and stuff like that as well. So engaging with the local schools is a big part of that training objective as well. Okay, so if we move on to the next bit, now we get back to a bit of the, well, where really are we?
Yeah.
So the first two bits were kind of already known. So we've got £70 million of public sector support from primarily Welsh government and also the UK government. We've got the Innovate UK funding, about £10 million, not £10, £10 million. They're slightly more generous than that slide says.
Yeah.
Well, words with deep level. And then we've got £15 million through that Ukraine 2 element as well. So, that's a nice tidy sum of money, but it is not enough to deliver this job. In January of last year, we began the public procurement to try and find an investment partner or partners. That process is ongoing. It's gone through some ups and some downs and some challenges. It's not stopped. It's not closed. There's not much more we can say about it. We think we're in a reasonable place and we're very optimistic. But there's only so much we can do until that actually gets signed on the dotted line and we go forward. But the door is definitely not closed. So that leaves us now, at this point, we've got the rest of that Welsh Government money and we've got the Ukraine 2 money that we are currently allocating to works and doing design. We're focusing down in, I'm pointing at the map that's not here, but down in that Washeries area where the Ukraine facility is going to go, because we've got to get that built to get their money. So that's where the effort's going in, with a view to getting by the end of this spring, the earthworks in that area commenced. We need to do this summer's earthwork season. We need to get that whole area leveled up, which is not a trivial amount of work, but it's small compared to the rest of the site. That will allow us to do two lots of construction. So the construction of the railway system, actually, the first bit, we will have some discrete bits going in at the end of this year. And the rail systems for the whole site at the end of the following year. That's the target that we're going in. The bits we do early allow us to support Ukraine 2, allow us to do some initial R&D and testing on some very limited pieces of infrastructure, but it gets us doing something. And that's a really important sort of stake on the ground, really. So yes, we are now operational, albeit in a small way. And there's some opportunities on the branch line as well, that we can potentially make some use of that to do some more extensive testing. We're talking to them about that because they're interested in some aspects of that as well. So it's, how can we work together to achieve that? All of that with the intent that sort of late 26 into the beginning of 27, that's when we expect all of the core facilities to be up and running. That doesn't mean everything by any means. So things like the hotel, the technology park, they will come on stream after that. But we can't sort of build a flashy technology park and then have no trains running around the track if there's no track there. So we're going to prioritise that in the right way. But they will come on stream very quickly after that because they're quite essential developments on the back of what we're doing. So the construction, as I'm sure you'll all have been told countless times, with the size of Gibraltar, it's 700 hectares. That's also the same size as Gatwick Airport. And that is genuine. That's not it's not really anywhere near. If you put a map of the two on there, they're a pretty good fit. And everyone says, "Oh yeah, we've heard it's big. Come to have a look at it." Oh, I didn't realise it was that big. That's the one comment you get from everyone who visits the site. We've got all the planning consents in outline. We're currently working through the detailed planning conditions for the bits that we're putting in first. Planning is always going to be a laborious process, but we're working through that. We've got the earthworks contracts awarded, subject to confirmation of price, which is subject to completion and design, but that's ready to go. And
So as it stops raining.
well, yeah, exactly. This is when we're looking at July time, which is when the season really starts. July to October will be the period that we can get that proper earthworks done. I mean, that said, there are bits that the site has been mostly cleared, and the earthworks next are about the levelling and everything else to do with the world. And that is significant. Even though we've reduced some of the need by taking out that inner loop, we've still got 2.5 to 3 million cubic meters of earth to move overall on site. And that's staying on site. We're not bringing new material in of ballast, and we're not taking that material out off site.
Right.
It's moving around the site in different ways. Some of it to build the earthworks plateaus that we need, some of it to create landscaping features. But yeah, nearly 3 million cubic meters of earth moving around. Materials, we're building up materials at the moment. We've got some new stuff on order, particularly switching crossings. And we've got a number of new ones. We've also got a number of second hands, which we're going to use in the sidings area, which we've got from local areas. We've taken some plain line up from our own site, from a sister mine further around the valleys. And we've had a load of redundant things like sleepers and track panels from TFW. And so we've cleared some of their sites and taken those materials. And then probably the most significant one recently is when the Severn Tunnel was closed for track relaying. Most of that track has ended up on our site. We're also expecting to get the next lot when that comes out later this year. So because we've got more time to plan that, hopefully bigger panels. We've got them in short panels. But we plan to weld that back together into the sidings, and it's perfectly fit for purpose there. And that helps us with the infrastructure loop as well, because by laying equipment, we've already got through part of that life cycle, so we can look through the accelerated wearing based on having done some of that already, rather than starting with the brand new railway, which we've got to run in. All of our suppliers are being encouraged to try out new installation techniques, new products and things as part of the build. Always a challenge getting innovation in there, but we will continue to plug away at it. We will supply some of these things free issue where we can to force down the path of using new things. And there's a lot of sustainable construction going on in there as well. As I said, we're keeping all of our materials on site, reusing them. We're using recycled materials. There's a lot of ecology work in there. Anyone who goes past the site will see lots of the fencing up there to catch 3 or 4 newts or something. We haven't had many problems with that, but we've done all the right steps to do that. And we have got some important bits of land that we have to avoid, because we've got sites of interest for nature conservation, all sorts of things around there that we have to try and protect and work around. We're rewilding on parts of the site and planning in landscaping and tree planting and things like that. So again, part of the sort of social aspect of the site, we are trying to be sustainable in the future. A lot of other work has been working around the commercial model. Possibly many of you might have seen a lot of announcements over the past 12 months about partnerships forming with different organisations, small and large. We've been working on the commercial model that they can get engaged. And some of that's really difficult, because as I said before, for the infrastructure side, there's nowhere like this, at least in Europe. So there's no role model to look at. Say how
can we model is quite like
yes. So it's very difficult to find a baseline to compare anything we propose against. A bit easier with the rolling stock. It's a fairly clear market for that. But at the same time, we're getting the interest, and we're not just getting it from the UK, but we're getting it at least from across Europe. As Arthur said, we've got reach out into other parts of the world as well, where there is interest. And sometimes that will be through the digital side of things, less physical, because you don't have to have everything in one place or all people in one place. But there are ways that we can integrate that around the world. So the past year has really built up that potential client base and that understanding. We've got letters of support from over 150 organisations that are all this facility needs to be here. So that's built up the momentum behind the business case and the investment. And then there's some examples of the kind of organisations there with some significant big hitters commercially. Not just a testing site and not just a railway site for that matter either. So there are things that we are looking at or we're planning to look at later around energy. So we want to be net zero in operation, so we have to do something about renewables. We're currently planning our connection into the neighbouring solar farm, so that can provide a feed into our site. Further down, we will have a link into the grid, but we've got the potential of getting that wind energy through. And we're looking at the opportunities for where we can do things such as hydrogen and batteries on site, because we've got all the space and we've got all these facilities and we've got the test track to be able to run them on. So it's quite a sweet spot in terms of testing out those things. And plus, if we get the energy generation for electricity, that gives us the power to then build up the hydrogen stores when the demand is low, and when we're running the trains around, we can concentrate it so we can balance our overloads. Automotive sector, there's been discussions with the Highways Agency. There's a number of things that we provide that are common to any testing facility, and we've got a lot of space. So why go and build something completely in parallel when? So there are opportunities there. Digital, there's a lot of interest around the digital and how organisations can use different parts of the digital twin, not just to see what's going on our side, but to prove how these things work. Communications, there's masses of stuff around that. There's a number of projects in the area that are pushing things out on comms. Number of big organisations that are looking to how they can demonstrate some of their future technologies. For the railway, we've got MCS coming over the line, which is the replacement to GSMR, and so we're pitching to be the place that can all be tested, because again, we do away with the problems of the live railway. And testing it on those, well, you can do it in isolation first. And mobility testing on there, but you name it really. There's so much you can do with a site that's large and the facilities that we put on there. So energy and sustainability is a big one again. So in terms of operations, so we're looking at 20 to 30 megawatts for ourselves for the 25 kV supply. That's coming through a static frequency converter. That's initially both tracks at 25 kV provide, but we are providing for other electrical power as well. So we are looking at utilising that local renewable energy. You go to the site, you see the wind farms around. Yeah. In the grand scheme of things, they're not far away. It's an expensive cable, but I think compared to pay a national grid to get onto theirs. And from an investment point of view, this is one of the things that's really attractive about the site. It's not just the railway, but it's the opportunities to have an industrial setting where you can test out renewable energies, generate them. So you can make money out of it, but you can also demonstrate the future principles in a real environment. And because one of the projects through Innovate UK is looking at flywheel storage, so that we can better use the energy we've got on site. We've got a train going around that loop, accelerating and decelerating every 3 minutes. There's a lot we could do about recovering that energy, storing it, and pumping it back in again. Then at the end of the day, making some hydrogen into it. Very circular economy for energy there. That's just a picture that illustrates the opportunities for energy on the site. So this isn't absolute, but we've got good sites here in the pink colour that is for solar power, and we're looking at solar power on some of our buildings and things like that as well. Opportunities for the wind turbines to come along in the future. Anyone who's been up there will tell you that it's generally a windy site. There's lots of free energy up there, and then other areas where we can do, as I said, batteries, hydrogen, so on. So we've got all that space to play with. So this is just really a bit of a summary, I think. So we're providing this one-off site for all these testing capabilities, and that's a significant gap in Europe at the very least, and to some extent around the world. We really can get all these products coming through to the higher technology readiness levels in a live environment before we're committing to putting them out onto the infrastructure. So we should speed up innovation and get products to market faster, not just get them to market, but get them through the market and into use. De-risking major projects. So we talked about Crossrail, talked about HS2, but plenty of others as well. Using system integration testing and starting to use more digital solutions to that as well. And again, being able to demonstrate that the digital model is right because we've got a real world model that validates it, vice versa. We're also going to be able to help projects show, or project delivery show how it can be done. So we're not just here to test products, we can test processes, methodologies, standards, techniques, whatever you want. Obviously, our approach to net zero will be a key contributor to the UK as a whole, in that both simply by doing it ourselves, but also by proving those technologies that can then be rolled out further and solving the difficult challenges once. And I think we've been saying this since the start, but we see this as a magnet project. So what we do is draw more in, not just again in the railway, but in wider sectors. We've already seen the interest we've got, and we hope to see that continue and more come out of that. And yes, that is the end of my marathon. So the slides will be shared. So there are contacts on there for the key members of the team.
All right, here we go. So any questions online, James?
No, not at the moment.
All right, so after that talk, are there any questions in the room?
You may well remember from last time I asked, what is your consideration of light rail and indeed very light rail prospects? And have you had any liaison with the now functioning facility at Dudley, which is principally being formed with West Midlands?
Yes.
Infrastructure in mind, and particularly Coventry.
Yes. So the second part of that question is the easiest. Yes, we have. We've had a few discussions with them. There's nothing formal. From our site's point of view, we are not focusing on light rail, and we're not looking to go and compete with BCIMO, particularly in that space. But some of our future provision is to allow for different DC traction packages and battery traction. So there are things that we will potentially be able to do in that area. It's not the day one focus. Speaking without any formal authority, I see there being cooperation between organisations like ourselves and themselves.
Sensible.
Because nobody can provide everything, even though we can probably provide more than anyone else. Nobody can really provide everything.
I think to go come through Ukraine as well.
And what will be strong for the UK is the UK being seen as a place to get all of the testing done, and where one organisation can't do it, some of the others can pick up the slack and vice versa. So, we are looking at those relationships, but there's nothing formal or commercial in that.
Right, thank you.
Thank you, Ron. Any other question?
Yes, and using the branch to bring materials in.
Yes, so the first rail construction we're doing at the end of this year that you mentioned, which was partly to give us some R&D facilities, is also to give us a construction siding and run round. So that's building some of our initial design so that we can bring materials in by train. We can't guarantee that we can bring everything in. It would be nice, but we're actually quite a small player in terms of booking some of the trains and things like that to get in.
But my concern is at the moment you've got virtually a dead railway, which is becoming a playground more and more. I mean, my house is the length of this room away track. I look down on a crossing, the kids come down to the crossing, they're running back and forth, and it's a very bad environment.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I actually, to show the level of mentality of some of the people, a woman knocked at my door about 16 years ago and said, "You a railway?" I said, "No, I work for the railway." She said, "Can you get the times of the trains altered so they don't clash with the school opening and closing times?" And I said, "Absolutely no way, that's not going to happen." I understand when it's not going to happen. You should not be taking children near the railway line, because they will think in their mind that railway lines are okay, and they'll go down on the main line.
Absolutely. It's one of the, as I mentioned, with some of that training and education, we're engaging with local schools as well. We need to get that message across. So it's not just about the fun messages of is an engineering grade.
I've actually stood in my back garden and watched the police chase children up the line in the last 3 years.
Yeah, it is a big problem, and we're working with Network Rail to get the right opportunities to use that branch, and we do want to bring materials in because that's the right thing to do. To build the railway is to use the railway to build it. But it does have its challenges as well, and level crossing misuse on there is a big problem. One of our team was at one of the occupation crossings. The gate was left open, so he closed it, got back to his car, and the guy had come out of his house and opened the gate again.
Well, they've done some repairs and redo the gates, on near the crossing, right near where I live. And, I had a chap, again, I was in the garden working, and he came out and said, I'm gonna write to my MP because all these gates are headed the wrong way round. I said, what do you mean? He said, well, if you ride down the hill there on your bike, you should be able to go straight through the gate. I went, and straight into a drain. And he went, no, if you're careful, I said, you could write to the MP, Welsh Assembly, you could write to who you like, those gates are fitted correct. And they fitted it in the proper manner that they open them out, walk away. And he said, who's our local MP? In the name, I said, yeah, this is in down. Oh, I'm going to go there. I said, fine. But I said, those gates are right. I said, you can go from here to the end of the earth to try and prove them wrong, but they are right. You know, you've got to have spelling games with that.
Yeah, it's the mentality you've got to tackle, unfortunately. Yeah, it's a tricky one.
All right, any other questions? Thank you, Steve. Any online?
Is there going to be an opportunity for people to visit the site and see what sort of goes on?
You mean now or when it's up and
Well,
running?
or in the development process?
So it's difficult at the moment. We do a few limited visits for industry partners that are looking at bringing technologies in at this stage and things like that. But it is a construction site, so we have to be careful about that. But there are potential opportunities in the future.
I'm chairman of the local retired railways club.
Yeah.
You know, there's a lot of interest in it. Initially started a WhatsApp group, you know, to see what was happening, and then, of course, that's gone back to back, so there is, you know, potentially you don't see anything happen. But sort of down the line, I wonder if there was a possibility we could contact.
Yeah, so once we start getting some track laying and that done, I think that would be the time to go.
A lot of the problems about the tours that we do, you can only do them by Land Rover. You can only get 4 people in a Land Rover, so they're kind of quite discreet rules. But I think, you know, community engagement is really important, and I think people seeing what's going on the site in some way is also important. And you know, I can
Obviously,
pass on to one of the comments.
where you could go and just get an overview of the place, you don't want to walk around it.
Yeah, there's you know, there are intentions towards visitor centre and stuff like that, of some sort. What stage that's available is another matter, but I'll raise it with our head of comps and see what he's thinking is.
Yeah, numbers, I think, is the challenge.
Yes, yeah.
We will, we have done some open days, but as David's suggesting, for commercial interest, fundamentally.
Yeah.
But we will start doing that again, probably from March. We'll do it the kind of first couple of months of the year with the weather as it is. But you know, we do have 3 Land Rovers, and we can do a kind of 3 tours in a day with 3 Land Rovers. So you could do the math as to how many people we can accommodate. So if it's relatively limited numbers, I'm sure we'd be able to do something. But perhaps you could kind of liaise with us if you know where the kind of interest is and what the kind of numbers are. We'll see what we can do.
You could consider later on using some of the light rail vehicles which already exist, like the one that's been tried out at Ironbridge. And indeed, probably at Dudley.
I
use it.
Yes,
It's a bit large, and they could take about 30 people.
yeah. When the site's fully up and running, there will be different things being looked at.
I potentially
public access, but
that.
Right, there's no further questions. Call upon Lee to provide the vote. Thanks.
Sandy. Thank you, gentlemen. It's a fascinating talk. And as someone who grew up in the South Wales valleys, I'm very much aware of the decline of, since the decline of the coal industry, the effect that it still has to this day on employment in the area. And I think this is a very exciting opportunity for employment in the future. And it's good to see that you're engaging with schools, colleges, universities throughout South Wales. I think it could bring a lot of investment into Wales, into Britain as well. If you're global, then let's hope that it does attract European interest. So I wish you all the best with your endeavours, and I'd like the members here to join me to thank David and Arthur in the usual way, please.
Right, before I close the meeting, are there any comments about the notes on the last meeting which went out with the? Any comments? No, okay. And the next meeting will be here again, Monday, the 12th of February. We've got Andy Savage, who's the chairman of the Railway Heritage Trust, coming to talk about railways in the Great War. I'm sure that will be very interesting. I think many of you, probably quite a few of you know Andy from his days down here. And then our next meeting in March, the 11th, will be a look back at what the Core Valley lines were like, going back a bit as well. So from Adrian Humpage, Dr. Adrian Humpage of the Welsh Railway Research Circle. Okay. So if there's no further business, I'll declare the meeting closed. I'm sure some of us will be reassembling in the Prince of Wales in due course. So if anybody wants to join us, then please feel free to do so. Okay, thank you. Yeah, excellent. It's good to see it's exciting to get going, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm sure you great. I just heard it from this
I think it's one of those things that once it gets moving, it starts with other things coming on. So I think really if you do this.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I can say stuff like, you know, things that I don't tell them to them if you do before. I might see it like problems like. That's what these very. Been out there. Yeah, I'm trying, you know, opportunity, they just routine tests. I've been what I'm doing. Going through. You say that. That's one thing to relax when you do this. Yeah. He's very high touch. No, he lives like on there. It's just too expensive. I think you. Yeah. Yeah, sorry.
It's not just the cost, it's the risk tolerance equation, which is very different. We've looked at this in industry, was tested this. Products. Andy was saying, and they literally, so they know it. Test it.
We had some of them deliberately misset, or just to say,
Try and get a best that from
it's not generally the way to simplify the most to get a basis. What's going to get over.
What age you're gonna have is, do you mean truck gauge? What do you mean?
if you want to get yourselves in the oil map, yeah, so here's the man to spend. 5'3".
They just, only one two vehicles from. Yeah, so they're, and the darts are being replaced.
Yes.
As you probably well know, they got 104 total vehicles of extreme vintage.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Well,
technically, just.
Long time no see.
The cost, yeah, it's a cost in this, yeah, that's the matter.
We've got it hard, that's the big one.
Yeah.
They fully just finished it. Yeah, it's not putting the second rail out of the outside.
Yeah, it's very interesting.
Well, there's no other questions as well, there's the cost, but also would that sector